When a corrupt anti-Trump judge humiliates JD Vance in court, he thinks he's above the law. But when his target fights back, karma hits fast, leaving the entire courtroom in stunned silence. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The day started like any other in the federal courthouse, except for Judge Marshall Davis's particularly foul mood. "I said no coffee in my courtroom," he barked at his clerk, making the young woman flinch. "And tell that defense team if they're not here in 2 minutes, I'm issuing contempt charges." The packed gallery watched as Davis stormed to his bench, his face already flushed with irritation. His reputation for harsh treatment was well known, but lately his behavior had become increasingly erratic, especially in cases involving conservative figures. "Your Honor," the court clerk approached cautiously, "Vice President Vance has arrived for his testimony." Davis's expression darkened instantly. "Well, isn't that special?" he sneered, not even attempting to hide his disdain. "Make sure he knows this isn't the Senate floor. In my courtroom, his title means nothing." The atmosphere shifted noticeably when JD Vance entered. He moved with quiet dignity, nodding respectfully to the court staff. Davis watched him like a hawk, drumming his fingers impatiently on the bench. "Let's get something straight," Davis announced, his voice dripping with contempt. "I don't care what position you hold in Washington. In this courtroom, I am the law. Is that clear, Mr. Vance?" The vice president's measured response only seemed to irritate Davis further. "Crystal clear, Your Honor. I'm here simply as a witness to the truth." "Truth?" Davis scoffed. "We'll see about that." His gaze shifted to the defense table. "Now, let's get this circus started." The courtroom battle begins. For the record, Davis interrupted the defense attorney's opening statement. "I'm already tired of the political theatrics in my courtroom." He shot a pointed look at Vance. "This isn't a campaign rally." The defense attorney tried again. "Your Honor, we're simply establishing the context of Mr. Sterling's charitable—" "The context?" Davis barked out a laugh. "The context is that your client is accused of tax evasion. Period. I don't need a history lesson about his so-called charitable work." Every time the attorney mentioned Sterling's community contributions, Davis would cut him off with increasing hostility. "Irrelevant! Move on! I won't warn you again." His gavel slammed down so often the court reporter had trouble keeping up. When it was time for Vance's testimony, Davis's behavior became even more erratic. "Stand up straight when you take the oath," he snapped, though Vance's posture was impeccable. "And speak clearly. I won't have any political doublespeak in my court." "Your Honor," Vance began calmly, "I can attest to Mr. Sterling's financial transparency regarding the Faith and Family Foundation." "Oh, here we go," Davis interrupted, rolling his eyes theatrically. "Another conservative fairy tale about family values." The gallery stirred uncomfortably. Even the prosecution looked uneasy at the judge's obvious bias. But Davis was just getting started. "Let me be clear." He leaned forward, his face reddening. "I've seen enough rich conservatives try to hide their money behind charitable facades. Your presence here doesn't impress me, Mr. Vice President. In fact, it makes me question the defendant's character even more." Vance remained composed, but something in his calm demeanor seemed to further enrage Davis. The judge's hands trembled slightly as he shuffled through his papers, his eyes darting nervously to specific documents on his desk. "I have here," Vance continued steadily, "documented evidence of Mr. Sterling's charitable contributions, including the March Foundation meetings." "Those records are inadmissible!" Davis practically shouted, though no objection had been raised. His reaction seemed oddly personal, almost panicked. "Your Honor," the defense attorney stood. "On what grounds are you—" Don't you dare question my rulings." Davis's face was now bright red. "One more word, and you'll be joining your client in contempt." The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This was beyond judicial discretion. It was starting to look like a personal vendetta. "Your Honor," Vance spoke up, his voice remaining respectfully firm, "these documents were properly submitted during discovery." "Oh, were they?" Davis sneered. "And I suppose your fancy White House connections had nothing to do with that?" "Let me tell you something about your kind, Mr. Vice President," Davis continued. "You think you can waltz into my courtroom with your political privilege and—" "Objection, Your Honor." The defense attorney found his courage. "This is completely inappropriate." "Silence!" Davis roared, slamming his gavel so hard it echoed through the chamber. The turning point. "Your Honor," Vance interjected calmly, "perhaps we should discuss the specific contents of the March 15th meeting." The change in Davis's demeanor was instant and striking. The rage in his face gave way to something else. Was it fear? His hand froze in midair with the gavel. He stared at Vance as if seeing him for the first time. Those meetings are not relevant to these proceedings," he managed, his voice suddenly less certain. "Not relevant?" Vance asked quietly. "That's interesting, Your Honor, considering those meetings directly involved charitable contributions to—" "Enough!" Davis slammed both hands on his bench. "One more word about those meetings, and I'll have you removed." The courtroom was dead silent. The judge's hands were visibly shaking. Vance remained unfazed. "My position has nothing to do with this," he said. "But since you mentioned protection, perhaps we should discuss the Liberty Foundation's protection payments." Davis's face went from red to white in an instant. "How dare you? I mean, what payments? There were no—" "Actually, Your Honor," Vance reached for his briefcase. "I have some very interesting bank records here. Would you like to explain the monthly deposits from offshore accounts that coincidentally align with your rulings against conservative defendants?" Davis exploded. "Shut up! You have no right, no authority. I am the law here." "Your signature on these authorization forms suggests otherwise, Your Honor." "Justice is served." A new voice suddenly rang out from the back of the courtroom. "This court is now under federal investigation." A team of FBI agents moved down the center aisle. "Judge Marshall Davis, stay where you are." "You can't do this!" Davis shrieked, backing away. "I have immunity. I have connections. Do you know who I am?" "Oh, we know exactly who you are, Your Honor," the agent replied, holding up a thick folder. As the agents restrained Davis, Vance stepped forward. "You set yourself up," he said quietly. "We just gave you enough rope to hang yourself." Davis's final walk of shame out of his own courtroom was a powerful symbol of justice being served. At the end of the day, justice isn't decided by those who seek to control it, but by those willing to defend it. At the end of the day, justice isn't determined by those who abuse power. It's upheld by those brave enough to challenge it. In a world where corruption thrives in the shadows, the truth will always find a way to shine through. If you believe in standing up for integrity, accountability, and the fight for justice, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and stay tuned for more powerful stories. God bless you, and God bless America.